Hello, I hope this presentation finds you well. Editorialese 3 R's, retire, replace, remediate, are incredibly important for accessibility in this day and age. My presentation will focus specifically on remediation for accessibility, using existing online textbooks. But first, a little bit about myself. My name is Jay Seeley. I am one of several patron service associates at the University of Nebraska at Omaha's Criss Library. This time last year, I graduated with a bachelor's degree in multidisciplinary studies that was entirely online, entirely virtual, so accessibility for online textbooks was a huge deal. It was formative in how I got my degree in the first place, and it helped me be much more accessibility focused myself. My multidisciplinary studies major was concentrated on library science, and accessibility, equal access to all kinds of knowledge was a huge part of the library science concentration and was a huge factor of what drew me to the major and to the career. In my case, I didn't need to use a screen reader whenever I was an undergraduate in college, yet all of my work was virtual. So if there were broken links, if there were documents that I couldn't access, that would have created quite an issue. I am a member of the Welcoming and Access Committee at Criss Library. I am very accessibility oriented, and as a result, I was given a number of existing online textbooks to remediate. This is what my current slate of online textbooks look like. This is everything I have access to. I am about halfway done at the moment of recording. For my first example, I will use Tyrone Williams' STEM on a Budget book, just to show how I can edit the book info, I can organize the book by looking at chapters, I can add chapters, I can delete chapters. We all know that the objective with remediation is to get those red flags or yellow alerts of accessibilities completely down to 0, which will give us that blue check mark. How long this will take on any given chapter of any given book really depends on the content that you're editing. Sometimes it will be incredibly simple. Sometimes it takes a little bit more effort with pulling resources from other websites, from other schools, checking permissions, things like that. So one of the more important things while you're doing remediation is to constantly be toggling between your changes and the preview of the actual page itself. There are some very simple mistakes that can be made here, such as wondering where the title of the chapter is on your preview page and then realizing that there is a literal show title box to check or uncheck. So I always make sure that show title box is checked, since that is basically always the intent of the original author for this page. You are at any time able to see the past revisions made to any single page. Similar to a Google program or a Microsoft program, you can go back in time and just start working from another person's past revisions if that's what you want, or you can and you can also see it in HTML form if you like those kinds of basic codings, which is something I'm not personally gifted with anymore. So I just stick to the cleanest, simplest displays. Now, when you are on preview mode, this is what those flags will look like. Yellow typically signifying something that is a bit of an easier fix, and then red being indicative of perhaps a larger problem, in this case, a broken image. There are many times where you will see something upwards of 30 or 40 accessibility issues, and I would just say worry not on those, because a lot of them are going to be the same problem repeated in different instances on the page, and there will be a way to address all of those at once with some precautions, as I will go over later. Now, these are 3 of the most common issues that I have come across in all of my textbook remediation that I have been doing. Heading formatting is something that is often messed up You will see a lot of pages starting with a heading 3 or a heading 4 whenever a heading 1 or even a heading 2 is appropriate to start the page, and just because of the order in which those are assigned importance and how that will show up on screen readers. We also have too much uppercase text. If you see on the bottom right there, that little red circle that I did was in screen readers that can come across as almost like shouting. We also have no alternative text for images. That is maybe the most consequential and biggest of the common issues to fix. You want people who cannot see the images to know what the images are, as they contain a lot of important information most of the time, unless they're decorative. So you will see on a page like this that shows up as having all of its accessibility issues resolved, there will still be things such as the summary and supplies needed headings being in all caps. A lot of the times, if it's something short like that, Pressbooks' accessibility checker will not flag that as something that needs to be remediated, and that goes back to the discretion of you and the original author of this textbook, who you should be in contact with whenever you are making revisions. Another example of things that I had to remediate on this page was the list format under supplies needed. That wasn't originally formatted as a list, so that was something that I had to change. So the order of headings is super important. The use of uppercase text is super important, and alternative text for images. And I would add to alternative text for images, image attribution. Those are all hugely important. Those are the quickest fixes that you will be able to make. Embedded video files will say, is this video accurately captioned? You have to check if those videos are captioned. If they are YouTube videos, then there's an automatic caption generator, so those ones you can click yes. On issues like those, Pressbooks might say 8 similar issues on this page, and there might be 8 other videos. You can click yes, and then suddenly those 8 issues disappear. But I would advise just checking before you do that to make sure that they really are the same issue before you just blanket fix them all. Another thing is, once you are done with your first pass of remediation, it's always good to go back and make sure that all of your formatting and caps locking and bolding, italicized, are all consistent through every page in the right areas. I don't think it is a good look if the formatting, even if it's all accessible, to wildly vary page by page. This is what correcting an alternative text in an image will look like once it's done. But how do we get there? How do we get to that finished product? Let me use another online textbook to show you how I will create alternative text and best practices for doing so. But first, just a quick peek into every opportunity to fix something is an opportunity to explore Editorially's community and how they recommend fixes, not just fixes to what you are remediating, but also to the Pressbooks interface itself. That must be accessible too. That must be streamlined to the greatest effect. You will see issues that community members, such as myself, have created that are still open, and then many more that are already closed. We will dive back into Editorially's website in a minute, but first, how do we add alt text to this image? I don't click Fix Add Alt Text because it just gives that little window that obscures the image that you're trying to provide alt text for. So this is how I do it. I just actually make it so I can see the image, create the caption and the alt text in the same window, and boom, fixed. Now here are the offsite checks required. So is this link text a URL? That example on the right-hand side. Yeah, you just want to check that that link actually still works. And that also ties into what's on the left-hand side. Is the linked document accessible? Do you still have permission to view the linked document or even the link itself? In the case of a no longer working URL, you can take it upon yourself to find something equivalent, but at the same time, it's not like you would necessarily know what is equivalent to the information contained in that link since the link is broken. Is the linked document accessible? This is something I've had to do a few times where I find another way to access the original document that was supposed to be linked there through UNO's databases. But if the answer to can I access this for both a link and a document is no, or it's complicated, you will have to consult the author of the text and then get an approved fixed link or document from them. There will also be instances where you will see a chapter page that is kind of just overloaded. There's seems to be way too much content on one page, especially proportionate to other pages of this same online textbook that you are editing. If anything stands out in that way in the textbook itself, then I would suggest finding a natural point in that page to split and create another chapter. That is something that you can run by the original author if you would like. It is also something that you can do yourself. It really just depends on what instructions you've been given at the outset. All right, we have been slowly ramping up on the levels of involvement for these remediation fixes. Now we are at one of the most involved ones, which is tables. I'm sure anyone working on any of these 3 Rs can relate to tables being more of an involved process. You will see kind of every mark on the incorrect or inaccessible table is marked red. It is usually a heading issue combined with the cells in the table not being properly formatted for the information that they contain. Now, how do you go about fixing these? Well, let's get back to Editorially's community and the resources that Editorially itself offers. So the difficult truth is that you are probably just going to have to recreate this table entirely yourself. You're going to have to, in many cases, start over. But in this screenshot, Editorially is giving you fixes, and they are letting you do troubleshooting here, and all of this knowledge is accumulated from the community. So what does this community look like? Well, this is kind of a landing page of Editorially's Pressbooks that is available in any kind of question mark that you see on that blue informational accessibility check. Here they're telling you how they check the content, what kind of content they are checking, what kind of mistakes, in exhaustive detail. Also seeing all the different platforms that support Editorially, and they are constantly adding more. I believe that they just added one for, yes, Drupal, and WordPress is coming very soon, which is going to be huge. Now let's go even further. The Ally or A11I, 11 characters and accessibility. I really like that they are giving you crash courses in accessibility here. They're like basically seminars that you can attend that they host on their site. And they have their own accessibility statement. A good touch, I think, is that you have your theme toggles of system, light or dark, right below the sentence accessibility helps everyone. They're really... When it comes to recovering images, like that broken image that I showed you at the outset of this presentation, There will likely be some context clues either in the paragraph, the text of what is being talked about on that specific online textbook, or maybe a caption that is showing the source. All that would lead to another instance of you tracking down an image that either closely approximates what was originally intended to be there, or just finding the image itself and then saving it to your computer and then uploading that media. That way it stays there, and all the media that is associated with a textbook can be accessed on its own. Here's a little gallery of everything that is used in just one of these textbooks. If for some reason that problem is going to come back in a year or two based on these images like being broken again or something, it's just always good to include a credit for every image. That way remediators down the line will be able to see exactly where you got your image, and they can do the same thing that you did to keep that image current. Also, it's just good to attribute your images. So this is what a completely finished page looks like. The blue check mark, you have met your objective, and your role should not be just a silent role. There will be acknowledgement at the either the outset of the book or at the very end that you did work on it to make this accessible. These books are important because in many cases they will be first-year students accessing these materials. Many of these materials have exercises which the students will be graded on. And then there are other books such as the one that I showed you from Tyrone Williams, the STEM on a Budget one, that is intended for other instructors. And I believe in equal access to these resources. Every student deserves a shot at a proper education. Every instructor deserves a shot at being able to teach their students. It shouldn't matter what their physical abilities are. These resources should be available to everybody.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here. My name is Jane Knudsen. I'm an assistant gallery manager at Bak Museum, the Learning Center. Today, I'm going to be talking about Right-First accessibility and how it relates to the Pressbook program with regards to digital integration and educational content creation. As an example, I'll be using a project that I've been working on for the University of Nebraska at Omaha for a couple of years now. We're going to spend some time going over some information and how it relates to accessibility in online content. And then I'll be showing you what I've been working on and how you can make your content accessible through Pressbooks while keeping in mind the Right-First framework. Let's get started. So to begin with, how do we talk about Right-First when it comes to accessibility? Well, Right-First is one of the 3 R's in the 3R framework, which is used to ensure inclusivity in online content, especially when that content is representative of the work being done by a professional institution, like, for example, a university. The other 2 R's refer to removal, which is the deletion of any material that actively hinders inclusivity and accessibility, and remediation, which refers to revision of existing material, whether that be revision of content, programming, or design. Right-First mainly refers to the creation of new content, basically saying, do it right the first time. So that means when you are developing online content meant for mobile or desktop use, you should keep in mind how to make it as accessible as possible for every user. The clarification of this may feel redundant, but Right-First in action does involve a lot of thoughtfulness. As an example, some questions that you can ask yourself in a broad sense are, is this open and accessible for all users? As in, is this usable for those with communication disabilities, visual and/or auditory? This question does involve consideration, and for some, research as to the content preferences for those with communication disabilities. Then, the question, is this restrictive for any users? It's a similar question with similar considerations, but it also requires you to reflect on your content and check that your work does not place any barriers for online visitors. Keeping something like this in mind cuts down any possible remediation that may take place in the future. Accessibility is, of course, a concept with many subcategories and considerations. It's entirely possible for someone to build content that they think is wholly accessible, but then find later that there's still more work to do. This is a very common hurdle, but what's nice about a program like Pressbooks is that there's a lot of guidance quite literally programmed in to make sure that you are aware of things that you may not have even thought to notice. In this, you're able to have multiple eyes on what you're doing. Now, if you haven't used Pressbooks before, know that it is essentially a digital self-publishing tool. It can be helpful for individuals like authors or content creators, or people who work in educational institutions like staff members, professors, librarians, and even students. It's easy to hear this and imagine the program as something like a word processor, but it helps to look at it as something more visual. If you already have text and content pre-made, Pressbooks can help you format your work into something visually cohesive and accessible to the public. Pressbooks does have several customizable features, which we will go through at a more in-depth level later. Many of these features are tailored to make your content easy to navigate for any user, as well as visually appealing in reference to your own tastes. You have options from several templates and fonts, and you are able to insert and customize headings, images, captions, and the placement of body text. And thankfully, as you go along, the program does offer an accessibility manager that marks any writing, formatting, or images in need of adjustment. This can be helpful to those unfamiliar with Right-First framework, as it allows you to be aware of any considerations you may have forgotten, or even if you want to keep a kind of visual tally in mind as you are working. So, a little bit about the project that I've been doing. I work at an art museum connected to UNO called Bak Museum, the Learning Center. We have a collection of over 500 pieces by the artist Samuel Bak, and we do a new exhibition surrounding some of these pieces every semester. So, since we opened in early 2023, we have had 7 exhibitions and counting. When you work in a museum that changes its exhibits often, you do think about longevity and archiving. How can we keep stock of all the work we've done and the things that we've presented? How can we make sure that what we've done in the past can be seen by the public in the future? Thankfully, in 2024, I was given the opportunity to make a visual archive of all of our previous exhibitions as a Pressbook. Now, since 2024, this project has taken on many changes. Originally, I had it so that each exhibition was one long chapter, just a huge, long document with different headings for each gallery. I was a lot more interested in succinctness than presentation at the time. Thankfully, some people with better sense informed me about what a nightmare this was navigationally. So since then, I've consolidated this work into different chapters for each exhibition, and worked within the accessibility framework that the program provides. I've also been able to learn quite a bit about the considerations you need to take while making accessible content. I'll go a bit more into some of those considerations and how they might present themselves. This list is not exhaustive, but here are some examples of things that I try to keep in mind while making accessible content, or converting existing content into a more accessible medium. First off, navigation. You want to keep in mind how people are getting from point A to point B in what you're presenting, and if that path is as streamlined and comprehensible as you can make it. Usability follows similar principles. When it comes to interaction, are things straightforward? Is there a level of superfluous complication that makes interacting with your content more of a chore than a pleasure? Alternative text is a more specific point than the previous ones, but it's one that requires a lot of thought, especially if your Pressbook is image heavy, like mine is. Alternative text isn't necessarily captioning, but providing context for the image that you're using, giving any and all viewers the information necessary to gain the whole point you're trying to make by using the image, even if they can't see it. There are so many elements to successful alt text, and a lot of these elements are conditional to the nature of your work. We'll go more in depth into this later. The use of user-friendly visuals may sound fairly intuitive, but it's another element that comes with a lot of moving parts. Here's an example. Okay, so we have 2 blocks of text here, both giving the same basic information. However, one is a lot easier to deal with. It's easy enough to say, well, the one on top is ugly. And that's true. We are firmly out of the GeoCities era, so there's no reason to use this kind of color scheme. However, beyond being noisy and abrasive, there are a lot of reasons why this visual is also inaccessible. Most openly, the colors. The colors themselves are low contrast, which is never advised. But even further, they're low contrast shades of red and green, which becomes even more problematic for colorblind viewers, as red-green colorblindness is the most common kind. Beyond color, the font is a problem. I love Times New Roman, but sans serif fonts are preferred for their spacing and readability, especially for users with dyslexia. This is why the lower example is much more attractive and more accessible. There's a clear contrast between the word and the background. The background is red, but it's a cooler, more pleasant shade. The font is Verdana, which is a popular sans serif option when it comes to accessibility. Thankfully, the customization options in Pressbooks already make these considerations for you. Alright, so this is how I have the Samuel Bak Museum Exhibition History Pressbook set up. As you can see, I have each exhibition existing as its own chapter within the main body of the book, and then each gallery or section of the exhibit as its own part of the chapter. Sometimes there are slight changes or additions to this formula. For example, in our most recent exhibition, Justice and Hope, we had large sections in different galleries talking in depth about different topics. So, before the reader visits Gallery 5, which features a lot of artwork about justice after the Holocaust, there is a part that gives context related to the Holocaust. Of course, if I wanted it to be so that the reader gathers historical context after viewing the artwork, I could easily move the case study part after the main gallery part. Basically, doing something like this allows us to create a digital means of navigation that mimics how we preferred guests to navigate the space during the exhibit. For this most recent exhibit, we wanted people to start in the main gallery and then to work their way backwards from Gallery 5 to Gallery 2. In person, of course, someone can choose to travel a museum any way they'd like, but in a digital replication, we present the desired path while also giving context to how the exhibit was organized in its original presentation. To offer a different example, our previous exhibit was organized so that the visitor begins in the main gallery and travels from Gallery 2 to Gallery 5. This choice can then be reflected in the organization of the Pressbook. It's not only that we want the Pressbook to mirror the physical experience of having visited our museum, but we also want the Pressbook to offer the most optimal way organizationally to view the works that we have curated. When you're creating a Pressbook, you're given quite a few options when it comes to visual appearance. Whatever theme you choose will become the theme for the book overall, which helps a lot when it comes to consistency. For my project, I chose hooks. Right off the bat, there's visual accessibility in font and color. Hooks uses a sans serif font, opening up your readability. Also, for our purposes, it has a nice contemporary textbook feeling that stays accessible without sacrificing style. Here's the theme in action on one of the parts under the first exhibition chapter. As you can see, there are various headings used throughout. The headings offered by Pressbooks go in descending order, which, believe it or not, is an accessibility feature. There's a big difference in visual noise between heading 1 and heading 6, with heading 1 acting as a kind of pronouncement and heading 6 acting as a kind of postscript. It's important to pay attention to what order you're presenting your headings, as you want your information to be communicated in an effective, streamlined manner. Here's an example. You want to talk about the Beatles, and you want to give information about them in a way that's visually balanced. An easy, immediate choice might be to give all sections the same heading. And while that is visually cohesive, presenting each piece of information the same way kind of flattens things out, making it so that there's not an instant visual shorthand of how you ought to digest the information. Then you might think to employ something subtle for the following headings, like heading 6. However, when you do this, there's a level of visual disintegration. The shorthand given doesn't say that we've gone from something broad to something narrow, but rather that we've skipped over some information in our narrowing. Also, let's say that you choose heading 6, but you have a tangent that you want to go on about Paul. However, when you expand this, there's no difference between your Paul section, your tangent, and your John section. Then it becomes easy for the reader to muddle all of this into the same level of information. The best option, then, is to go to the next heading after 1, and descend further as you narrow down into more subtopics. Then, when you want to move on to a new topic, you can go back up a heading level. A good rule to keep in mind when it comes to Pressbooks and visual information is that you don't want to skip. Presenting easily navigable, streamlined information means being mindful of the ways in which your audience would want to absorb information. This isn't only in reference to headings, but also images, captions, paragraph formatting, and other ways that you present your content. Something you might have noticed while I was working with those headings is the little yellow question mark that appears from time to time. This is the accessibility manager that I mentioned earlier. As you write and edit and format, it catches anything that may be inaccessible or even visually unfriendly to users. So, for example, when I went from heading 1 to heading 6, it was noticed. You click on the question mark, and it gives you a description of why this technique is not useful to viewers, and how it can even hinder accessibility. Then it offers a few ways to fix it. With this, you have a few options. First, you can fix it right away, in which case the window disappears on its own. Second, you can choose to ignore it for the moment. This works if you'd rather get down everything at once and come back to fix things all in a row later, which is absolutely how some prefer to work. This hides the alert for now, but the symbol for the hidden alert stays in the lower right corner as a reminder. Your third option, if you would really rather skip a heading level, is to mark the alert as okay. Same drill as ignoring the alert. The window goes away, but you do still have the reminder if you'd like to change things later. The order of your headings isn't the only thing flagged by this. You can get flagged for having a heading that is too long, which causes visual clutter. I'll demonstrate here how they flag you for this, just with information from the top of my head. Okay, there. So once again, you have options, and they do offer some fixes, which is nice. If I chose to convert this to a paragraph, it does that for me right away, which is helpful. You can also be flagged for block quotes that resemble headings. Or formatting within a paragraph that the program recognizes to be intended to be a heading. Even the ways that you type within the headings can be flagged, like if you use all lowercase or uppercase. And for me, this is interesting because it's not only catching what could be visually incohesive, but also what could read poorly in a tonal sense. So there are a lot of things that this program catches you on. Visual readability, alignment, navigational issues, tonal issues, really any sort of counterintuitive visual presentation that you might not think of, it'll notice. And this becomes kind of a helpful way of teaching you best practices. You'll go through already pre-implementing these things to avoid being flagged, and in doing so, you make accessibility a habit. I'll point out how the same thing is achieved with how the program utilizes alternative text. All right, back to the project that I've been working on for the Bak Museum. As I mentioned earlier, this is a visual guide of every exhibition that the museum has put on, meaning that there are going to be a lot of images standing in for our paintings. Each exhibition has roughly between 30 to 50 works in total, which amounts to several images in each chapter requiring original alternative text. If you're unfamiliar with accessibility guidelines, you might be wondering what I mean by alternative text. Alternative text, or alt text, is another accessibility aid for those with communication disabilities. If a person who is using an auditory screen reader is accessing your content, you want to be able to make sure that they are getting the full breadth of the images that you are providing. That is, you want to be offering detailed descriptions. There are several resources on the internet when it comes to writing alt text. My favorite guide I've found for my purposes has been from the Cooper Hewitt Museum, but many universities have their own guides which discuss the differences between lengthy and abbreviated alt text, as well as the necessary things to include. Something that it took a while for me to understand was that the information you are giving about an image has a lot to do with the context in which you are presenting it. For example, take this photo. You have a woman. There are many ways to give alt text for this image, some that you're probably already thinking of, but let's examine some context that would make alternative text take a different form. Let's say that this photograph is used in a completely neutral context, like you just needed an example of a woman. You could probably write something like this. A young blonde woman in a white button-down and black blazer. She is smiling and looking at the viewer. Okay, now let's say that you're presenting this image in an article about professional work attire. Because this context is more specific, you'd tailor your alternative text, like so. A young woman is smiling and crossing her arms. She is dressed professionally, a black blazer, a white collared shirt, and combed hair. Or you're writing a chapter for a cosmetology textbook, and you need to talk about her hair. You'd say, a young blonde woman is smiling and crossing her arms. She has long hair cut to one length. There are many approaches you can take, which is the point. You use images in content to add something to the works you are making. When you are describing them for the sake of accessibility, you want your audience members to gather what you are attempting to add to your content by using these images. Okay, so how does this apply to Pressbooks? Like the header feature, Pressbooks has another feature that identifies points where you'll need alt text, and how you can change it to better suit your work. I've got this section from our last show, Suspended in Time, where I've got this beautiful still life painting from 2003 called Coup de Vent. As you can see, I have not written alt text for this piece. So I can click on that little question mark and choose what I'd like to do. It can pop open a window for me to write, but I prefer to go to the actual image, hit edit, and write the text there so I can see what I've written in full. Here, I'll start. Several pears tumble off of a tilted wooden table. One pear is suspended in air by a rope. The pears are set against a bright blue sky. This is really all I need for my purposes, what is literally being presented in the work and the tone set by the use of color. If I wanted to, I could add more and get really detailed. One point I could add: the pears are brown, green, and yellow. One is bright blue. That can be worth knowing, or it can be superfluous. It depends on my goals. However, now that I've added that, I get an alert that I've hit my character limit. A limit is set because when Pressbooks gives the audio of a chapter, it reads alt text in one long section. If you miss something, you have to listen to the entire caption over again, instead of skipping back a sentence if you'd prefer. However, if you absolutely need to add more to what you're describing, you can provide it as a caption. So, as you can see, there are many avenues you can take to apply this feature, and Pressbooks gives you a lot of ways to do it successfully. In conclusion, right-first accessibility means taking into account how inclusive measures will affect any and all users accessing your work. You want to look towards optimizing your content to make it pleasing, navigable, and open. And the great thing about the Pressbooks program is that you are assisted in doing this every step of the way without your creativity being stifled. As I mentioned earlier, right-first refers to the creation of content specifically with accessibility in mind to limit any edits you have to do in the future. And as we saw with Pressbooks, the checkers in place not only help you to be aware of any accessibility guidelines you may have missed, but helps you to learn and internalize them along the way. By continually being reminded of these steps, you're only strengthening your ability to create more accessible content down the line. I have been very pleased to be able to work with and learn from the Pressbooks program, and I hope that it will be as helpful to you in creating accessible online content as it has been for me. Thank you all so much for listening. Have a good day.